prisoners of war of the German, we were taken inside the prisoner camp compound, which already had 2,500 prisoners there. And as we were walking toward this compound, I could see a gate and a lot of people milling around at the gate, you know. I said, my gosh, all that 2,500 people, I don't know anybody. How am I going to make out in this kind of environment? I got up closer to the gate, looked in there, and I recognized several people who happened to be people I trained with in pilot school earlier, who had the good luck to get shot down before I did. And so I had a few friends there, and that eased my mind just a little bit, you know. From there we were taken and put in barracks with rooms for 15 men at the start, and a lot more after we got more crowded. And 14 other men in a room in a barracks with me.
Mike, Jeff, in front of your mouth.
I did pretty good at first, but I'm getting.
It's hard to manage all that.
Now, once we got into the room in the barracks, I was assigned a bunk, took off my jacket, rolled it up to make a pillow, and slept in the rest of my clothes. The Red Cross had given us a couple of blankets when we were processed in, and it got so cold there in the wintertime that we would take the German newspapers that circulated around and nobody could read, you know, but fold up the blankets that we got, sew them up on one edge, and stick newspapers between the layers of blankets, use them for insulation. And it worked pretty good. Not so comfortable, but at least it kept you warm. Now, food provided by the Germans consisted of black bread and coffee made of acorns for breakfast, thin soup and potatoes for lunch. Then for dinner, we got sauerkraut, green sauerkraut, and blood sausage, which I never attempted to eat. I have no idea what blood sausage was like, but it just sounds bad to me. Now, fortunately, do you remember the name Hermann Goering as a German general back in World War II? Hermann Goering was the angel to the prisoners of war. The Japanese and the German army and German intelligence were very cruel to prisoners of war. But Hermann Goering had been a fighter pilot in World War I. He developed such a respect for aviators of all kinds that when he was made head of the German Air Force in World War II, he decided that he was going to observe the Geneva Convention for the rules of treatment of prisoners of war. And the entire time I was there, I never saw anybody physically attacked or beaten or any of those kind of things. Now, if you tried to escape, you'd get shot in a minute. Escape was the best way in the world to get into trouble. And there was an escape at this camp, an attempted escape, in which the day or two before the tunnel that had been dug was completed. The end of the tunnel collapsed and the Germans found it. The Germans were there when they came out the next night for their escape and shot about 50 people, you know, so tunnels were bad business. Besides, they'd take you bed slats, and you only had 2 bed slats to hold your bed up, you know. Take your bed slats to shore up the tunnel so it wouldn't collapse. They didn't have quite enough bed slats to hold the tunnel so. One of the problems we had once we got settled into the daily routine in the prison camp that we were in, we got copies on a once-a-week basis, I think, of German newspapers, which very few people could read. And the news about the status of the war was all propaganda anyhow. We couldn't believe the news if you could read the German. And so, fortunately, the Red Cross and the YMCA helped us out a bit. Again, Herman said he'd go by the rules, so the Red Cross and YMCA had access to the prisoners. The Red Cross, when they were able to get through the railroad yards that were always being bombed, would deliver some food to the prisoners of war. YMCA would deliver things like books, things to read, that sort of thing. So we had a little bit of help there. Herman Goering was the first good luck I had. Red Cross and YMCA was the next good luck we had, given we were in prisoner of war conditions. We got tired of just getting the propaganda the Germans were feeding us about the status of the war. So in the summer to early fall of 1944, we decided we'd do a little blackmail scheme on one of the guards. By the way, the Red Cross included a pack of cigarettes in with the food parcels. And of course, the prisoners would smoke the cigarettes, and guards would look at it, gee, I sure would like to have one of those. Want a cigarette? Give the guard one cigarette. Guard come back the next day and give him 2 cigarettes. And so on until you give them a pack of cigarettes, in a couple of weeks, Then we'd approach the guard and say, we want to build a little radio. We want you to get the parts and bring them to us. Oh, the guard face turned white. Oh no, my commandant would kill me if I did that. Well, what do you think your commandant would do if we told him you've been taking cigarettes from us this last 2 months? And so we managed to get the parts for a radio, and strictly a shortwave thing. We had to be very careful about it because the Germans were always searching for contraband, and we didn't want the Germans to find the parts of the radio. So we had, I think, 15 or 20 men to each take one part of the radio, keep it on his person at all times, and at a certain designated time every day, get together all in the same location, in one barrack, Put it together, listen to BBC, take it apart, everybody takes one part. Germans never caught on to that. So we're feeling pretty good about the news we got because it looked like that we'd be able to make it home for Christmas of '44. Just about that time, we heard on BBC radio about the Battle of the Bulge. You remember that one? We didn't have any hope then of getting home for Christmas of '44. So we stayed well through Christmas and into January. Early in January, the Russians and the Americans were coming in, the ground armies now. Ground armies of both the Russians and the Americans were beginning to close in a little bit on the Germans. And the Germans got worried. They didn't want us to be liberated because we'd go back to our units and start dropping bombs on them again. And so we got an announcement by the Germans one night that prepare ourselves in the next 10 days for a forced march moving to another location. Would you believe the Germans came back in 4 days and said, be ready to go in 1 hour. So whatever belongings we had, clothes, food, that sort of thing, we grabbed it up. And most people tried to carry too much and they had to throw it away because they couldn't walk with so many things. We started down the road in the middle of the night, we had no idea where at the time, but we had to move to keep the Russians from turning us loose on the east side of Germany. So we marched 28 kilometers the first night, with only one stop for an hour, in which some of the guys would be able to go into an empty warehouse we passed by and get a little sleep, while the rest stayed out in the cold. So that was the start of our first forced march across Germany.